I think it's a feeling of comfort that it gives you to feel like you understand your situation and you have certainty over what's going to happen. So when I say, I don't think Sarah's very good at this job. I don't think she's going to be able to do it. It's almost a comfort thing. It's a certainty. I've convinced myself that I don't think she's going to be able to do a good job. Then if she doesn't do a good job, that's what I thought anyway.
Welcome to the Weekly Leadership Experience, a place for leaders to get inspired, be challenged, and grow. I am your host, Rashad Oberlander. Let's get started. Today's episode of the Weekly Leadership Experience is brought to you by my 7-day Leadership Growth Challenge. It's a free challenge that I've created, and it's delivered by email over the course of 7 days. I've created 7 compelling questions to challenge various aspects of your leadership, the way you lead, and why you lead. Go to rashadoberlander.com and scroll down until you find the 7-day leadership challenge, or look for the link in the show notes. Hello leaders, and welcome to this week's show. I'm joined today by Ben Brearly, who is a certified leadership coach, MBA, and consultant. He helps thoughtful leaders to manage the tricky balancing act of leadership and helping them to lead with confidence. Ben shares his passion for leadership through his business and podcast, The Thoughtful Leader. Ben is joining me today from Western Australia and has come on the show to talk about self-fulfilling prophecy, why we see it pop up in leadership so often, and how we can use it to our advantage. Ben, welcome to the Weekly Leadership Experience.
Thanks, Rashad. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man, it's good to have you. So thanks for getting up early, or maybe not that early, but it is the other side of the planet. What time is it where you are?
It's about 7:30. So I'm a pretty early riser. I get up pretty early. So this is okay. This is a good time slot for me, actually.
Well, good. Well, thank you for joining me so early. I'm not sure that I could be terribly coherent that early in the morning, but thank you. So Ben,
I think you're doing yourself a disservice there.
Well, you never know. Enough coffee will do enough wonders, right? So let's get started. Ben, tell us a little bit, first of all, about what got you into leadership coaching.
Yeah, so I've over the past, let's say, I think it's 16 years or so, I've been doing leadership roles as part of my work. So started off in technical software development roles years ago. I sort of got sick of having to take instructions about what software to build and all that stuff, and wanted to play more of a part in actually guiding it and all that sort of thing. And then so I moved out into more business-facing roles, business analysis, project management. Then I moved into consulting, actually, for some of the big consulting companies. And then that's when I really started to do more of the senior sort of leadership roles, project delivery, and other management roles. And then during that time, I sort of felt what I realized was I really loved the people development aspect of leadership, as opposed to the hitting the targets and delivering the big projects. And while I do a lot of project management work, or did a lot of project management work, that wasn't really what motivated me. The actual, the goal. It was more about the people development, building a good team, helping people sort of fulfill their potential. So that sort of led me to starting writing about leadership. So I started a blog, and there was no real direction for it at the time. That was about 6 years ago, I think. And I was just writing about leadership because I enjoyed the topic. I was passionate about it because I saw the impact it had on people in workplaces, particularly in the not so good workplaces where people are miserable at work, not acting out, not behaving the best they could be, based on the leadership and the culture that's been set. So, and then as I did more of the writing, I started doing some online business work, so doing online courses and products and things like that. And I thought, I came across coaching as part of leadership, as in coaching team members and all that sort of thing. But I think in workplaces, a lot of the time, coaching is a bit of a mix of coaching and mentoring. And so I sort of got stuck into the actual, let's call it the craft of coaching, which was less advice giving and more helping people come up with their own solutions, I guess. And then I sort of made the jump about 6 months to a year ago to go. I was doing it in addition to my normal job. So I was doing a day job, and then I was doing some coaching work before and after work. Actually, particularly with people from the UK or US and Canada as well, because the time difference suited my work hours, because I could do some coaching in the morning, go to work, and then come home. But it was pretty tiring, and I thought, I'm passionate about it. I want to give it a go properly. So I went out and started doing leadership coaching full time, as well as some consulting work and some sort of team dynamics workshops and things like that as well. So it was really, I guess, in short, I realized that my passion was more about the people development and helping other leaders succeed rather than the actual, climbing the career ladder and all those sorts of things.
Cool. So it's sort of like a bit of a passion project sort of became the career almost, and sort of what you really found that you drew meaning from in terms of helping people versus, the project management side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And don't get me wrong, there are aspects of my career in terms of project management, program management that, and the middle management roles I've had that I actually really enjoyed. But I guess I don't feel like I enjoyed enough of it, and I wanted to enjoy more. And when I did the coaching work and some of the team development work I do, I found that was, way more motivating for me.
Yeah, awesome. And so your business and the name of your podcast as well is Thoughtful Leadership. What led to the name of the podcast and business, and why Thoughtful Leadership?
Yeah, so the business is Thoughtful Leader, and I think I was trying to come up with something early on. This was back in the blog days where I'm sort of like, I've got to call this website something. And I just threw around a few things, and I was wondering about, what is it that I think goes wrong or goes right in organizations with regard to leadership. And I sort of narrowed it down, and in my experience, it's the thoughtful aspect of leadership is one of the most important in terms of being intentional and conscious about how you're leading people and the impact you're having. Some of the worst leadership I see is more about, it's not necessarily because leaders are malicious or trying to do the wrong thing by people. It's more about just blundering into situations without considering the impacts of what they're doing. So the opposite of thoughtfulness, I guess. And I thought it summed it up pretty well. There is a bit of a connotation there, around thoughtful being soft and not confrontational, but I don't see it that way at all. I think thoughtful is about being intentional with your behavior and your actions and how you manage people. And it doesn't really need to be a soft approach necessarily. You've got to have difficult conversations and make hard decisions and all those sorts of things like any other leader. But it's more about being intentional about how you're creating that environment for your team, which I think is a huge part of leadership.
Yeah, that's interesting and important, very much so. Just touching back on what you were mentioning when you were telling us how you got into coaching, you've got quite a diverse background. You've been a part of a number of different companies, big and small. And I also understand you speak a little bit of Mandarin, and you're also a bit of a basketball player, like quite a diverse set of interests, right? So how has that sort of influenced the way you lead and sort of your philosophy around what you do?
I think so. I won't overstate my Mandarin skills at the moment. I think I've lost a lot of that, to be honest. But I guess I grew up playing basketball. The Mandarin aspect was, I think, one of the most important parts of it. I guess if you want me to go into that now a little bit about my trip. Living in China and those sorts of things, because I did that for about a year in total. That was one of probably the most important experiences I've had that shaped my life and leadership, I would say. Is just to go back a bit, I moved to Sydney, which is across the other side of the country from me, when I was about 20 or so, and lived by myself. Got really homesick there. So I was there for about 4 years, got really homesick, had a lot of anxiety around that. I wouldn't say I enjoyed myself as much as I could have. I think I made a lot of good friends and things like that, but I was, quite homesick and didn't really enjoy myself. So I eventually came back to home, and I thought there was something nagging at me. I wanted to be the sort of person that could travel and could go and live somewhere else without being homesick and worried about that. And so I knew a friend who had gone to China to study, and I asked her about how that was, and she loved it. And I thought, that would really get me out of my comfort zone and prove to myself that I can go somewhere else where I don't know anyone and get along and enjoy it, right? And so I ended up, I think it was around 2006. Yeah, 2006. I ended up moving to China, studying for about 6 months there, doing Mandarin language study in an international language university, and then spent a further 6 months traveling and living in China, which was really amazing, and big culture shock, lots of different things going on, and that really gave me the confidence, because when I was over there, I found that I really enjoyed myself. I made a lot of friends. I didn't fall into those patterns of homesickness and all that sort of stuff. So I sort of proved to myself that I can get out of my comfort zone like that for a prolonged period and enjoy myself and actually get through it all. And I think that gave me a heap of faith in the future about anything I was trying to do. I felt like, yeah, I can do this. I've done this before. I've been out of my comfort zone before. I've struggled through things before, and that was really, really important part of I think my leadership as well, but just in general in life, I think has been a really important one for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the lessons we learn in life are sort of what builds us over time, I guess. And I mean, you've sort of had your faith, as you say, tested a few times. Like you had a fairly significant injury to your knee, and that, I don't know if it was playing basketball or whatever. Why don't you walk us through that a little bit and what happened after?
Yeah. So my knee injury was a really interesting one. I used to play a lot of indoor soccer as well. And I think what happened was the physiotherapist I go to seems to think that it could have been an existing injury, which was partially torn. So the ACL, anterior cruciate ligament in my knee, was partially torn, he thinks. Sorry, as a result of indoor soccer and a bad tackle and all this sort of stuff. But then my leg sort of adjusted to it, apparently. So because it was only partially torn, my leg sort of built around it and stabilized itself. And I didn't know there was a problem. And then I played basketball, and I switched to basketball a while later. Even though I'd played basketball as a kid, I hadn't really done it competitively for a while. But anyway, switched back to basketball, and then was playing twice a week. And then my knee would pop out occasionally, just probably once every, let's say, I don't know, once every 8 months, my knee would pop out when I landed from a jump. And then I'd find myself on the floor and my knee was back to normal. And I was thinking, what's going on here? So I found out that I'd had a full rupture of my ACL at some point. And I'm not sure how it happened, but I was still able to walk and things. So it wasn't like I was instantly, unable to function. But so then I found, I went to a physio. They said it's ruptured. Well, they think it's ruptured. You should go get a scan. So when I got the scan, it was shown that the ACL was fully ruptured, which means basically, in general, that's known as a really crippling sporting injury. You probably know, and generally people are out for a year or so, roughly around that time, if you're a professional athlete or whatever, doing the rehabilitation, all those sorts of things. And the common approach to that is to have surgery. So you stick they graft the ACL back together, and then they do rehabilitation so that your legs get stronger and all those sorts of things, and your whole body's suited to the new ligament. So I was sort of going down that road. The physio I was seeing at the time said, go and see this surgeon. I went to see the surgeon, who was really old school guy. Quite highly recommended, but he was said to me, look, yeah, unless you have surgery, you can't expect to play sport again or do anything like that. And then luckily I was working at the time at somewhere just in a management role, and one of my team members actually said to me, oh, you should go talk to this physio. He's a specialist physio, does non-surgical approaches to rehabilitation for these injuries. And I thought, okay, that's worth a look. And so I'd never heard of that. I just thought, in the media, we often hear things like ACL injury, surgery, you're out for a year. And it's a big disaster when a big celebrity sportsman goes down like that. Sportsman or woman, sorry. And then I went to see this guy, and he's a specialist physio focusing on non-surgical approaches. And he basically helped show me some examples of where people had rehabbed without surgery. So there was a snowboarder who'd done her ACL competing. I think she was quite competitive, Olympics and World Championships and stuff like that. She had done her ACL while snowboarding and rehabbed it fully without any surgery. And he showed examples and videos and things, and he was able to show me case studies of how she had rehabbed without surgery. And so that gave me a bit of faith that, oh yeah, this might work, right? And then he said to me, one thing he said to me was later on in the treatment or in the rehab, he said to me, I can tell almost instantly when someone walks in the room whether they're going to be able to do this or not. And his thing is about the mindset you have, whether you believe this can work or whether you believe you're broken. If you believe your knee is broken, for example, you're much less likely to be able to rehab it successfully because you don't really trust that is going to hold you. That you feel like you're broken. I need to have surgery so that I'm fixed again, and then I'll be able to, support myself properly. So I thought that was really interesting from him. And a lot of what he does is really about mindset. So we do the rehab and all the exercises and things and all the balance work and all these sorts of intense stuff. But he said a lot of it's about him encouraging you and making sure that you can see progress and motivating you to keep going, rather than, and I did ask him, what's the difference between what I'm doing and what you would do if you had surgery and then had rehab? Because what usually happens with surgery anyway is you have the surgery and then you do rehabilitation afterwards, where you do strengthening and all that stuff. And he said, actually, it's not that different. It's actually, you do very similar things as if you'd had surgery, but you just do them in a quicker fashion with the rehab approach. And there's been lots of studies recently done. A lot of the previous studies on ACL rehab were about, they compare one type of surgery to another type of surgery and see which one's better. But there was very little going no surgery to surgery. And so now they're starting to do more research on that to find out, oh, actually, you don't have to have surgery. But I guess the takeaway for me was believing that approach could work was a massive part of me being able to execute and actually do that. And I'm not saying that if you believe that your knee is fine, it's fine. But, some people need to have surgery. That's just the nature of it. But it's just a huge part of me recovering and strengthening, was basically believing that, yeah, this approach is going to work. I'm going to do all the exercises. I'm going to do it rigorously like I'm meant to. And I can, my knee's not broken. I can still play, and now I'm playing basketball twice a week. With a few breaks due to COVID, obviously. And I'm 41 at the moment, and I'm still going strong with regard to my knee. So that's been a bit of an eye opener for me that was even possible, because I didn't even really know. Yeah.
Yeah, and excellent. I mean, I think really a key point in terms of what you were saying about your physio, saying like, he could kind of pick when you come through the door, like who's going to be successful and who's not, based on their mindset and approach to, like, I need to get surgery in order to be fixed. And so if that's what you believe, that's what you'll need. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Definitely.
So, I mean, this is really important experience, I think, in relating to the business environment. So, Ben, like, in what ways do we see the self-fulfilling prophecy showing up at work or in leadership?
Yeah. And yeah, it's a really good point about the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's one of the most interesting things I found in leadership is around this self-fulfilling prophecy sort of phenomenon, let's call it. And the way it sort of works is, if you believe something to be true, you start to act that way. So you send signals out to the world that this is true for you. Then the people around you notice those signals coming in about how you're behaving, and they start to act accordingly based on what you believe. And then what happens is you can get people adjusting their behavior based on what you're putting out into the world as a leader. So as an example, it might sound a bit cryptic, so I'll just do a quick example that I came across. I was working in an organization where there was a person working in a role, and she got put into a project management position. to run a certain project in her area. And she's quite a capable person, very smart, knew the business quite well. So she had everything really she needed to succeed. She was just new in project management, so she had to learn those skills. And so I was helping, sort of mentoring her from a project management perspective. And what I noticed was her manager was really, let's say, not confident in her team members' ability to actually manage that project. So the impression she gave, her manager was very much, you could see it in her behavior. It was micromanagement behavior. It was asking questions. Why haven't you done this? Oh, you need to go talk to that person. Oh, we should have done this by now. It was constant stress and angst. And what that did, see, the manager didn't believe that her team member was capable of doing this, and you could just see from her behavior. So then she sent those signals out into the world, and her manager would say to me, oh, yeah, I don't think she's cut out for this, and all those sorts of things. And then what the team member who was trying to run the project obviously picked up on this behavior. They picked up that this manager wasn't really on board. They didn't think that they were capable. And so then that person started to go, oh, maybe I'm really not good at this. Maybe I'm not doing a good job because my manager obviously thinks I'm not. And that made her performance even worse, in that she started to act tentatively, towards the project. She started to check in with the manager at every turn because she wasn't confident in what she was doing anymore. And so her performance actually got worse with regard to managing the project. And then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then the manager said to me at one point, see, I told you that she wasn't going to be able to do the project. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because your behavior started off that series of events, which led to the downward performance, which caused the project, the management of the project not to be successful, let's say. And so that was how I saw it manifested in one situation, which was really interesting to me when I sort of understood what was going on. Yeah, it's really tricky, and I see it happen quite a lot when people say things like, oh, you get a bunch of managers in a room and they'll be saying things like, oh, nah, they're not cut out for this. Oh, I won't give them that opportunity. They won't be able to handle this. A lot of managers make a lot of assumptions about people around the workplace, whether they're capable or not. And that can really set the scene for a poor performance if we start to not believe in the people around us. And I've seen it work the other way as well, obviously, where someone really believes and they really put faith in someone, and you see an uplift in performance because the person goes, oh, wow, they really believe in me. I must be actually good at this thing. I'm going to put in my best effort. And their performance goes up. And then the manager goes, look, see, I told you this person was awesome for this. And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. So it works both ways. And it's just something I think is really important for leaders to be conscious of, is that impression they give out to the world based on their beliefs really can shape actually what happens in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. I'm reminded of the quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And I can't remember who said it
exactly.
just at the moment, but it's very true. It's sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy we think of often only in the negative sense, because actually can be quite positive as well, given the
Definitely.
right intention and circumstance. So really great story, actually, Ben. So, like talking about this a little bit, because, good leaders are coaches too. So, how do we leverage the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy to our advantage, but at the same time avoid those pitfalls?
Yep. I think I see it coming up in coaching with some of my clients, with regard to making assumptions about the team's performance. So what you'll see is, obviously, and the reason coaching is powerful is because we're, as leaders, we're stuck inside our own head. And so when you get someone external who can independently work with you on your leadership challenges and those sorts of things, you can get different perspective and challenge that mindset that you might have, which is difficult to do yourself. So in the case of self-fulfilling prophecy, sometimes I see it manifested where a leader is having performance problems with their teams, and they're sort of starting to have a mindset of, oh, this person's not cut out for this, or they're not good enough for this, or they can't do that. But I always see it as my default approach to leadership is to give people the benefit of the doubt. So my first stance will be, I believe this person can do this, and I'm going to support them to whatever, to do the work, and so they can achieve what they need to achieve. And then, if there's problems with that, then we provide some more support. And if there is performance problems and behavior issues, then obviously you need to sort those things out. But the first thing going in is to assume that someone's going to be capable and able to do the work and to fulfill their potential, which I think is a good default approach. So what I try to do with leaders who I sense are having this challenge is to just to challenge that mindset and ask a bunch of questions around performance and the environment, to sort of help them see that the way that the leader behaves has a huge impact on the people that they lead. It's not just that, Bob is a poor performer and he will always be a poor performer. It's a lot to do with the environment that we create and the way that we behave towards Bob and the way that we set him up for success, for example. So in the coaching, that's where I see it a lot, and trying to get people to shift their mindset and take actions that can give their team members, a feeling of confidence that they're on the right track and all those sorts of things. So we can do, what you were saying before, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy. We can do it in the opposite way, which is to improve performance rather than to make it worse. So that's sort of where I see it coming up in coaching quite a bit.
Yeah, which I think is, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of initiate that concept, right? Like, I mean, there's some coaching methodology that I quite like and is still being researched a lot, but it's like the idea of coaching with compassion. And it's sort of, I won't go into the kind of sciencey stuff, but it sort of taps into the it's the parasympathetic nervous system, and it taps into the sort of the ideal self model, where you sort of build someone so that they can sort of envision their ideal state, right? And it's a little bit of visioning, and it's a little bit of like, if you could do anything, what would you do? And then you coach from that place, because the mind opens up to the possibilities and becomes very coachable and pliable in those circumstances. So like, what would you say are some of the good ways that you can help initiate a positive self-fulfilling prophecy?
And I think that's what you're talking about there is very similar to some of the work that I do as well, with regard to the imagining and creating, sort of painting a picture of a desired future state where things are the best way they could be for a team, or a leader, whatever one that might be. And what you mentioned there, some of the ways that you do that is to help them. You do this visioning work with regard to the different senses that you have. So, rather than just like, oh, what's your ideal future state, and they describe something. Depending on the person, they might really resonate with different senses like sight, smell, sound, all those sorts of things, touch. And so you get them to describe the ideal situation in a way that's very tangible to them. So, okay, what are you hearing? What's an example of what you're seeing? What do you smell in this environment? And some leaders really are very much sight-based, and they just go, I see this and I see that. I see my team member being really diligent and responsive to requests or whatever. Then you might see people saying, oh, I'm at my desk. I've got the smell of coffee. I can smell the nice coffee there, and then I can hear the sounds of my team really getting along well. All these sorts of things like that. And it sounds a bit strange, but depending on the person and whether they're a thinking or feeling type person, they can actually get more into that vision state. And I think this is what you were talking about as well, with regard to getting people to feel like they've actually almost achieved it, which opens them up to actually, oh yeah, here's the possibilities, I can make changes. So I think that's a big part of it, is to actually and ask the questions, okay, if there were no consequences to this, if there was no barriers, what would you do? And I had a coaching session the other day where someone said to me, well, there are barriers. And I said, well, yeah, okay, but what if there were not, right? And so they start to think differently, because they go, well, I would just do this. And then you can actually start to take that and get it into a more practical way of working. So that solution they've come up with without any barriers whatsoever can almost be, in most cases, be adapted in some way to fit the real world. because I'm not saying that, there's this ideal situation. We pretend there's no consequences and we just take action, and it's amazing because our workplaces are political and busy and chaotic and full of different people. But getting people to see the possibility is really important, and getting them immersed in that. And some of the things you were talking about there about the visioning is a key way to do that.
Definitely. Something I was thinking about, Ben, and I'd like you to touch on here a little bit is there's two elements, I guess, right? There's the self-fulfilling prophecy with ourselves, right? Which, those are influenced by different things, but usually it's, let's say it's the voice in our own head. And then there's the self-fulfilling prophecy that we sort of impose on members of our team or various circles of influence. Why do we fall victim to doing that with our teams? Let's start there.
I think it's a feeling of comfort that it gives you to feel like you understand your situation and you have certainty over what's going to happen. So when I say, I don't think Sarah is very good at this job. I don't think she's going to be able to do it. It's almost a comfort thing. It's a certainty. I've convinced myself that I don't think she's going to be able to do a good job. Then if she doesn't do a good job, that's what I thought anyway. And so there's no surprises for me. And if she does actually do a good job, which is, probably unlikely in the situation, it's almost like that's a bonus. So I think there's a tendency to want to create that certainty around our outcomes by having that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it makes us feel a bit more in control as well, I think. Because when I take a leap of faith on Sarah, in the back of my mind, I might go, oh, she hasn't done this before. Maybe it's going to be difficult for her. But if I provide the right support, she might be able to step up and do this role, right? And I think that's a bit of a leap of faith for some leaders to actually put that support in, because there's a degree of risk there in terms of, well, I'm taking a punt that this person's going to be able to do the work. And if it doesn't come off, I'll look bad because I'm the leader. And I think it's easy to be critical, just to fall into that comfort zone. It's much less comfortable putting faith in someone who, you're really not sure whether they're going to succeed or not. But you can, if you have that mindset, you can craft an environment which helps them to actually succeed, right? As you would know, a lot of the things that we do as leaders and the environment we create can set the conditions to help those people succeed. And it becomes less of a leap of faith. Like, okay, go on, Sarah, you just go do that thing and come back to me and see if you've succeeded, which is obviously could be a recipe for disaster depending on the situation.
Yeah, which is interesting, and something that sort of occurs to me a little bit in this, what you were saying is like, you're the leader who's going, well, so and so's maybe not going to be very good at this job, and you're saying to yourself, like, I'm a good judge of character, right? It's a thing that like people popularly like to say, I'm a good judge of character, or I'm a good judge of someone's ability. And so you're judging someone's ability, and you've created two loops, right? And there's one loop that, Sarah in this case is not going to do very well at this job, which reinforces your ability, your belief in your ability as a good judge of character and a good judge of someone's ability. This is kind of a funny circular, infinite loop there of self-fulfilling prophecy.
And I think you're also disempowering the person that you're doing that to. So I've had another situation where a colleague was unsure of whether they should, what was it? They were unsure of whether someone could take on this workload that they were going to try to give them. And so they sort of said, oh, no, I'm not going to give it to them. They won't be able to handle it. And I'm thinking, well, you're possibly doing them a disservice, because you're making the decision for them that they can't do that work before they've even had a chance to try it. And that's, that can be really bad as well, because people are missing out on opportunities, and they aren't even necessarily involved in the conversation, because we've just said straight away, nah, I don't reckon they can do it. Because as you say, we're all great judges of character at all times. Yeah.
Definitely. It's an interesting dilemma, and I think that's something that everyone needs to be aware of. So, Ben, if you could tell us what the most important thing is to remember about our conversation on self-fulfilling prophecies, what would that be?
I would say it is about being intentional about the messages you're throwing out into your world or workplace, and being extremely conscious of that. Because you are, as a leader, setting the environment that your people are going to be working in. And it's not about, overthinking it and, having to panic about, oh, am I sending the right messages? But over time, when you start doing a bit more thinking about how you're going to respond in conversations, how you're going to show up at meetings you're having or whatever it might be, it starts to become a bit more ingrained and you don't have to think so much about it. So I would say being really intentional and conscious about the messages you're putting out into the world and what impact that might have on the people around you.
Very good point. Very good, important message. Wrapping up a little bit here, Ben, we're going to hit up the last two questions here that I ask every guest. What is one thing you know about life or leadership that you wish everyone knew?
Okay. So the one that I did think about here was that I think the one thing I've realized is that leadership is about setting the right conditions for your people to thrive. So it's not, and I think that's an important thing that I wish many leaders knew about or were conscious of. So as I mentioned before, some of the worst leadership I've seen is sort of what I call accidental leadership, where people blunder into situations and do things and they have no idea about the impact they're having. And it's an assumption that, Sarah's no good or Bob's no good, but often the reason that people are no good or underperforming or unmotivated is because of the environment we've created. And as a leader, we have a big part in creating that environment. We can't control everything, but we generally do have a pretty good degree of control over the environment we create in our teams. And so that's one thing I think is really important, that just because someone's showing up and they're not motivated today does not necessarily mean that they're a bad person or a bad employee. It means potentially that the environment they're working in is not set up for them to actually do their best work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, that just hits hard for me. And hits hard, I think, for probably a lot of the listeners, right? It's like, we sometimes forget that, we have a lot more responsibility in the success of our team than just like the person's individual performance, right? And that we actually have a big part to play in ensuring their success. Last question: when it's all said and done, Ben, what 3 words do you want used to describe your life?
Yeah, this is a good question. This had me thinking for a while, actually. So it was, for me, it's thoughtful, dependable, and supportive. That's what I want my life to be described as, or me to be described as, when I'm long gone. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Ben, the thoughtful leader, I appreciate your time today, man. Let's tell everybody where they can connect with you, learn a little bit more about what you're up to.
Yeah, the best place to go is my website, which is at thoughtfulleader.com. And there you can find everything, social links and all those sorts of things, as well as links to the podcast. My podcast is mainly a solo show, actually. I did an interview the other day, though, but so check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, everything on the website, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, look at the links in the show notes, folks, rashadoberlander.com. This has been a great conversation with Ben, talking about self-fulfilling prophecy and how we can use it to our advantage, but also avoid the pitfalls. Ben, thanks for your time, man.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Good conversation.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, would you head over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, leave me a rating, leave me a review, and share this with a friend. It spreads the word and helps the podcast grow. You can also find me on social media at RE Oberlander. Until next time, stay awesome.